and everyone you know, and your whole goddamn family.
Action! 3, 2, 1, go!
When I read this script by Josh Olson, I thought, well, this is mainstream, but it has some very disturbing undercurrents, and I thought if the studio was willing to go where I wanted to take it, I thought it could be really quite good.
You know, this may be a fairly normal revenge and retribution script, but he can bring something to it. It'll be something else. It'll be better.
If you really put a gun to my head, I would say in some very broad ways, this ties in thematically with his interests. It stays within that range of ideas of people being sort of pushed to extremes emotionally and notions of identity.
And some of the movies that he's done are more of a physical transformation into a different identity. This one's an internal struggle.
I think that all his stories allow us to look at things that are uncomfortable to deal with. You know, he entertains you first and foremost, but secondly, he says, consider this.
The movie opens with myself and Steve McCaddy, who plays Leland, my partner.
Billy is his cousin, or cousin, no, his nephew, actually. Leland got out of prison about a year and a half ago and went down to visit the family and hooked up with Billy and decided he should show him the world. Sort of like a tutoring thing.
I think you might well find yourself slipping a bit in the blood. Just sticking on your boots. You like your boots.
I like my boots.
The boots are nice boots. So.
A lot of directors are completely prepared before they get to set. They've got storyboards and they've rehearsed everything, and they get there, and it's kind of that Hitchcock model where he almost doesn't have to show up. Everything's ready to go, and you can achieve greatness doing that. David's got a very different approach. He doesn't storyboard, and he doesn't rehearse with the actors until he gets there. And then he starts feeling it out. He'll block the scene, he'll have them walk through it and see what works for them, and then he'll start designing his shots around them.
Good guy. Go this way. We let him get away from us. We see him steal a root beer, which is his worst crime. So we're loose, and then we go down to the cart. And follow the cart across, and that shows us that there's somebody else dead there. And probably that could be a cut right there.
Yeah, it feels as though it should be definitely one until then.
That's a cut.
I had always assumed, from looking at those films and how beautifully they're put together and composed, and how deliberate sometimes they seem, that these don't feel like movies that were designed on the day of shooting.
I don't make decisions exactly on the fly. I have to have some general thoughts in my mind about what I'm going to do.
There you go. Yeah.
I see once on the 27th, please.
But it's true that I improvise on the day as anybody would.
Would you like to look at it once on this lens?
Okay.
It's not because I have problems.
Yeah, no.
Lighting problems with the other lens. It's just that I think it looks better.
What's why?
27.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice.
You get a better feel.
I agree.
With David's movies, some people might think of effects and blood.
Multiple stab wounds in the chest. Throat cut. Your left arm, put it back. You can see your throat better. Lots of blood on the floor. Yeah.
It's never gratuitous, just for the sake of splatter, like zombie movies or something like that. There's a reason for it. It has its place in the picture.
His preoccupations have shifted over the last few years. He's more interested with what's going on underneath the surface of the characters.
Maybe as you come by, there's something you can reach for. You find your hand and come back. I'm not sure what. Let's think about that. Yeah. Maybe you ring the bell. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you just do that. Give the bell. We'll bring it closer. Maybe which would alert the little girl, as well.
Right.
Often actors are worried about small, fussy, detailed things, which in the hysteria and the pressure of production, a director might say, well, I can't worry about that now, or it's not important, or no one will notice, or whatever.
And roll. Rolling. Slate 89, take 7.
I try very hard to set the production up so that there isn't that hysteria, that I do have time and space and crew that understands, including very much the director of photography, that these details do matter.
Action!
There's a lot of play involved in the creative act. We're grown-ups, but we are putting on funny mustaches and hats and calling each other by fake names and pretending to be somebody else. Of course, there's a lot of money, there's egos, there's reputations, there's pressure, but at the same time, you're playing, and you can't lose sight of that.
I wanted to play Billy because he's a bit of a psychopath, really. He does bad things to people.
Keep your finger to your lips, and then slowly it comes out.
In my real life, I have to be very good, so when I get the chance to be bad, I have fun doing it.
And then he shoots you. But you don't really shoot.
Hey, Brittany, how you doing? This is the fake gun I was talking about. See? There's nothing in it. It's got a little cap there.
There's something different about looking into a little girl's eyes than if someone else was standing in or if you're just looking at a piece of tape on a wall or whatever. Billy and Leland have done terrible things, but I think this is something new for him. I think he's never killed a little kid before, and I kind of wanted to know what that would feel like.
Hit it.
Hey, on your mark.
We're gonna set.
There are certain actors that I might admire on the screen, but they don't attract me in terms of saying, but I really want to work with this person. I need a kind of eccentricity or something that's just off, more typical of a character actor than a leading man, let's say, and yet still has a leading man presence and charisma.
Viggo was very deliberate and thoughtful before he chose to do this movie. I met with David a number of times. He really wanted to understand the script. He wanted to understand the ending and the transformation. And it was really about him kind of falling in love with this character before he decided to do it. And he's really kind of blanketed himself with the reality of what Tom's life and what Joey's life would be like.
In terms of the way he approaches acting, I've never met, nor has Carol Spear, my production designer, met an actor who bought things for the set, was doing set decorating.
He would go away for the weekend and he'd visit his parents or whatever, and he'd come back with little trinkets. I've been thinking about this, and I thought Tom would have this, and he brought the fishing money. And it lived right by the cash register in the diner.
On my trips there, I would get things that I knew were particular to U.S. culture, U.S. society. A lot of the symbols that we accept as normal that have to do with guns and extreme elements of hunting are very aggressive. It was interesting just finding these things in different stores and like that and looking at them. Whether Carol would use them or not didn't really matter. I would have them in my dressing room.
The set that Carol built, it was a beautiful job of art direction and construction and sort of movie magic. You get jaded, but you forget the magic of cinema, that you can actually build something. If you go walk down the street in Millbrook, pick some garbage up at the door of his diner. We cut inside the diner. He walks in and has a dialogue scene. You can see the shops and the people and the cars outside, but the interior is all built here. It's the simplest thing I do, is to cut from an exterior in Millbrook to an interior on the stage here.
You shoot, then he's down on the floor. So you lean out like, you don't lean out, but your gun goes out like that. All right. And then you open yourself to the camera.
This was my first squibbed, dramatic, fly-through glass, cool death.
Brass plate, special rubber, small little explosive called a squib. Stick that in there. And these condoms full of blood. You put that over top of the explosive. And you take this whole thing. This goes under the shirt. Fires off, the little explosion goes, we get a hole, blood comes pouring out.
Cut. Pretty good.
Cut. Want to put the glass in?
Yes.
At first, they were going to have a double that they had lined up, and as I was just looking the way that they were setting the shot up, I mean, it's a better shot if you actually see me go through the glass and I'd have to cut around it. So I offered up my body. And also, I mean, how many times in life do you get to fly through a pane of glass?
Speed.
Set. Set.
Action.
Silicone. Looks like real glass,
Uh-huh.
except it's rubber.
And what are you going to use it for?
Throwing it at the actor.
When you consider the lives that most people in the world live, they're visited by violence very often. For us, it's sort of a traumatic event that we don't necessarily expect to find in our lives, that we're very favored to be able to live that way. But the truth is that violence as a way of life is pretty common on Earth right now. So artistically, you feel it's something you have to come to terms with and hope that you'll deal with it in your creative life and not have to deal with it in your actual day-to-day life. If there's a way that you could really do a cross-the-face smash with it and have it break and get a small amount of coffee and it go flying, maybe this is something that has to be done digitally.
And speed.
Action! Cut.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm great.
I think that violence is an unfortunate but very real and unavoidable part of human existence. You can't really say that it's never justified. You can say that it's never very attractive, though.
It's not glamorized or, you know, slow motion and blood flying through the air.
When you've got your boot say blam. Seriously. So,
Okay,
say
like
blam. And do a bit of a jerk.
Did that, but I didn't have to do it for your sound.
Yeah. Because we can't see it, so you could get away with that. It was about real brutality, the kind of violence that you would actually see in a street fight, for example, a kind of ungainly and not too graceful and very bloody. Action!
Yes, her. Fuck it. Do her. I lost my knife. Go ahead, stab me. Okay. Yeah. Ah! Blam!
Have I had a rough day today?
Yeah.
What happened to me today? I got shot, and my jaw flew off, and it hung down my neck. It was gruesome. They stick it on my face for about 3 hours.
For that particular scene, I even made like a little rubber tongue for him so he can just like, you know, shoot it out.
And then I was lying in a pool of blood.
Action. The tongue out more. Okay, and then go still. Okay, we can cut.
I don't know why he deserved that.
Part of what the movie is how the violence and the extreme violence that takes place in this town that's not used to something like that affects everybody.
When Tom kills the two guys coming to the diner, they're going to kill everybody there. No question that he's justified in his self-defense, but I also think there's no question that even without the character of Joey lurking within him, there's a huge cost to whoever does these things. You know, what happens to you when you do that, and what happens to the people around you when you're sort of an ordinary American household?
You know, you see Tom Stahl having this situation thrust upon him in which he reacts instinctively, so violence ensues, but he's congratulated for committing these acts of violence. In fact, he becomes, you know, a small-town hero.
I was scared. Those men, they were going to kill us. There was no doubt. You could see it in their eyes. And then Tom saved us. Tom's a hero.
The fact that in the United States, violence is celebrated, it tells you that as a society, we have a long way to go. And we sort of become inured to violence because it's just relentless, it's constant. So you're never really allowed to take a break and think about what just happened.
Family work.
I'm sorry. Do you think we know each other?
You tell me.
My character feels that he was done a severe injustice some years ago, and he's coming out to set things right. Eye for an eye, as far as he's concerned.
This man is not just casually noticing that perhaps this is somebody from his own past. He has a vendetta, and he has to be scary, he has to be real, and he has to suggest a whole past without verbalizing it. How long does it take to put the scar on?
It's an hour and a quarter.
An hour and a quarter.
There's a lot of life underneath what's going on here for my character in terms of the past and the history. And he's in the position of power because he knows the truth. And so he carries that with him. That position of power, if you will, is an enjoyable place to operate from because you got the guy on the spot, big time.
We all lie to ourselves and the people around us. You know, some in very small ways, some in very large ways. I mean, Tom is telling some huge lies, but what's fascinating about his character is that they've become true. He doesn't even recognize these guys.
And he takes it off for a purpose. His purpose is
My fucking eye, dumbass.
It's not just a scar and a milky eye that's going to make a character be scary. Just Ed's body language and the way he uses his voice. And he has disdain for Tom Stahl's wife because she doesn't know what she's involved in, and yet she's very feisty and angry with him, and he expresses it with a kind of scary humor. And it scares her, and it should scare the audience as well.
He really pushed me in a really exciting way. We were doing this scene in the mall one day, and it was my first scene with him.
Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Stoll. I've been watching over her.
You stay the fuck away from my family, son of a bitch.
There is no need to use that kind of language, Mrs. Stoll.
You know, we're doing the scene, and we're kind of working it out, and I was kind of all over the place, and it's my close-up, and he's sitting on the bench, and he looks up at me, staying in his character. He goes, "I don't believe a word you're saying."
Mr. Fogarty, if you...
Can I tell you something before you go on here?
Yeah.
I'm trying to help you out here. You understand me? I'm trying to make you understand something. You're living with somebody who's not who he says he is.
I hear what you're saying.
No, you don't.
I hear what you're saying.
No, you don't.
And instead of getting defensive and going, "What do you mean?" I stayed in my character, and I just gave him my next line.
If I see you within 500 feet of me or my children or my husband, I'll have you arrested. Can I possibly make myself any clearer than that?
No, Mrs. Stahl.
Good, good, good.
Hey, Mrs. Stahl. Don't forget your shoes.
So he was kind of directing me within the scene, and the scene became something really dynamic because he wasn't afraid to call me out on something. And, you know, I thanked him so much for showing up for me. When Fogarty comes to our house and has our son with him, I'm like a mother lioness. I just want to kill the guy. I'll do anything to protect my son.
Jack! Mom!
Don't make us hurt the kid, Joe.
I will get Jack. Please, go up to Sarah. Do it now.
Cut. And cut. I feel like that worked. It was really convincing.
The way we came out?
No. When you told me to leave.
I get tickets. And you get great seats. Better not looking.
You look scary. I mean,
Okay.
Cute. Scary.
It really becomes a family conflict then. From the moment that Jack sees Tom, my father, interact with Fogarty and his men, I think he just really puts into question, you know, who is my father and what is his past? You know, what is his history?
And I run upstairs after he lets our son go, and I look out the window. And I not only see my husband kill a guy, I see him devastate a guy. So brutally that I know in that instant, I don't know who this person is. I mean, it's really disgusting what he does to this man.
That looked real, didn't it? Watch, see if I can do that for you.
Oh, hurt. The Charlie thing, basically they're gonna have to shoot like in the 3 stages of makeup.
Yeah.
One with no prosthetic until the first hit, like a little bit of blood through the nose.
Yeah, so just if it is as though this ripped here.
Okay.
Action. Cut. Play that back, please. Well, that looked good, that first one.
Second one is the prosthetic that I showed you the photograph like that.
Yep.
And then the third one is the really crushed one with the green nose.
Yeah.
I have the prosthetic makeup's done, and I have the green face with the mashed up nose in the middle.
Set.
The green screen head will be shot in front of a green screen backing. To make it simple, because the best way is always to keep it simple, is with a syringe, with pressure in the syringe, we're blowing that through a blood system in the back, which goes to 4 selected holes that Stefan had chosen where the blood will spray out from, as if the bone in his nose had broken right up through to his skull.
On a David Cronenberg movie, you know, it's not going to be just any other movie. It's what we call cinéma d'auteur, you know, and he's definitely an auteur.
He has to move, take a step towards the car doors.
I know David makes his films his way and that he's autonomous to a certain extent. It really makes a difference when you're working with somebody who's calling their own shots, who's responsible for the final cut, et cetera, you know.
Action!
You won't need your toothbrush. We'll take care of it. Not that you can't come up with stuff, not that he doesn't listen to new ideas, no, not that he's not a collaborator, but ultimately it's his film and everybody understands that. It doesn't matter if I agree or not with his take on it. I know he's got a point of view about it. And if David hadn't been directing the movie and they asked me to be in it, I probably would have said no.
The difficulty in this film was trying to get things that I liked, that I felt were suited for the character, but at the same time that I could get multiples of. It's really hard because you can't just pick something because you think that artistically it's right. You have to pick it because you can get 6 of everything, which you generally get if there's shooting.
We shoot him 6 times tomorrow, which is these 6 right here.
And this is Ed you're talking
This is
about?
Ed Harris, yeah. It's Fogarty. And hopefully all of this stuff will be enough to shoot the poor man 12 times. And then Frank, on Tuesday, gets shot twice, I think. And then over here is Charlie. Charlie gets whacked in the nose like this, apparently, and spews large quantities of blood out of his mouth. So Denise is getting 2 or 3 more of these, because it's a lovely blood color. So he dies, he dies, he dies, he dies. Everybody dies on between tomorrow and Tuesday.
I'm kind of glad you killed those guys.
You don't want a 17.
I had to drive all the way out from Philly with those 2 guys.
I can imagine. So you don't mind?
Well, 3 against 1, you did pretty good. You got 2 of them.
You shoot better since you lost that eye. You should thank me.
Yeah, probably.
Vigo and Ed actually worked out a backstory, which was something that was never necessary for anyone else to know, but they knew what their history was. And it had to do with when Joey came to Fogarty's house and his wife was upstairs and, you know, and there was violence and then she came downstairs. You know, they had it all worked out in great detail.
Hey, this is an empty gun, guys. Thank you. Okay?
Where do they go?
It's full of emptiness.
It's supposed to be sensitive, right? So they're in Paris.
It's kind of a perverse twist on the classic wrong man scenario. You know, we play it completely straight throughout. There's that pivotal moment, I should have killed you in Philly. And it's like, oh, now you know. It's like, oh, wow, this is our guy. And I think that's something David really likes to do, is to screw with our sense of who a character is and what they're about.
Got anything to say before I kill you, you miserable prick?
Should have killed you back in Philly. Go right away, please, guys. Right away.
Working with such a talented cast for my first feature film,
Gun is hot, folks.
I really tried to just soak it up and watch them. I've come down to the set a few times when I wasn't working just so I could watch some of their takes and study their craft. In doing so, I'm also constantly pinching myself because I'm standing across, the set from Ed Harris.
Is everyone ready? Cameras ready? Good. Gary, go hot. 3, 2, 1, fire! How'd it feel, Ashton?
That's awfully good.
Was there any value to that?
I got a story. I got a story to tell some people.
Thank you all for welcoming me and being so nice. I appreciate it very much. Have a great rest of the shoot.
Yes, Bart.
Set.
Action.
Tell me the truth.
The easiest thing to do with this movie is play more with the is he or is he not this guy, and that the overriding kind of surfacey tension of the movie, but the character stuff, the meat of the movie is really what's going on with Tom and what's going on with Edie as they struggle through their relationship.
I like this idea of, and tell me what you think about this at the end, when I go over there, I'm just having those thoughts now. Oh my God, my whole life is a sham.
You know, David's scripts are really lean because he is interested in the actors filling things out.
In a sense, they are the custodians of their own characters. They protect those characters. They want to make them integrated and whole. And you as a director really should listen to that. You really should not move them around like pawns on a chessboard. You should allow them to be alive and to collaborate with you.
And you know, from this point on, I feel like I can, you know, barely stand up, basically, in my opinion. You know, so here, more, you know, here, but not just, I think I don't have it together, and that's why I go there, right?
Let me be honest, when I first read the script, I thought, supportive wife. And then I read it again, and I started to find some things in her that she was more of the man in this family than Tom was. Then when it changes, she kind of is forced back into this feminine, receptive, vulnerable place. And as soon as I found that shift, I started to look at it differently.
This killer that Fogarty warned me about.
I walk in and it's the first time I confront him. And when I actually hear the words that he's not this person, it's like a physical thing takes over my being and I just run to the bathroom and puke.
Maria had a really nice idea of going into the bathroom just for a second and then coming back out. And we don't need much, obviously.
How much time do you have? Because that's
Quite enough.
Yeah. Peter's so slow that you got hours.
That was a bit of a surprise because it was not in the script. We had an extra door on the set, but which was mainly for crew access, so that they wouldn't be stuck with one door to get into a set. So all of a sudden, she's running out the door, and unfortunately, it's the sound man or something.
He's not really slow, but he can tell you how long it will take.
We were running around frantically looking for extra flats, and luckily we had a couple of extra sinks and toilets, which we were able to get into the set on time. But it was instant set. And with David, you don't just build a corner of the set. You like to give him the whole thing because you don't know what's going to happen.
It's very interesting in a scene like that not to play into the other actor's energy, not to make it about Tom, but to keep in your own character's energy because it's really traumatic.
What are you? Some kind of multiple personality schizoid.
There's an anger there, but it's not just an anger with the person who in some way has deceived you or disappointed you. You're also angry at yourself for falling for it.
Jack's name? Sarah's name? Stahl? Tom Stahl? Did you just make that up?
And let's clear the lights for now, guys, until we find the shot.
We very rarely talk about visualization because we both like to discover that as we get close to the movie and see the different elements that go in front of the camera.
27.
You might even manage it without taking the board out. If I'd come up with a formula, say, oh, let's put the camera off level, it would no longer have an effect after a couple of minutes.
Oh, you know what? This is different. It holds very, very nicely.
Yes. So I think we rely on what's going on under the surface of the story to give that off-kilter feeling rather than an obvious formula in the imagery.
Okay. We shot most of this movie on a 27mm lens, which is quite wide, and is not a normal lens that you would use for close-ups, but I think over 90% of the film was shot with this lens, and it's just trying to find a coherent, cohesive visual equivalent to the psychology of the characters and the dynamics of the rooms and how people occupy their spaces and so on.
One way to do this, I suppose, would have been to look at everything that's Tom as Tom, and then everything that's Joey is Joey. But what I think is more interesting is to blend them, and then you sort of waver back and forth, especially in stressful moments or as things start to break down. It's just to see some bleed through.
I spent the next few years becoming Tom Stahl. Edie, you gotta know this. I was not really born until I met you.
It is not a lie that I did fall in love with Edie, that I still love her, that we had kids that I love, that we named together. None of that is a lie. I now believe that completely.
I needed him to be convincing as both halves of a role that requires an almost a schizophrenia, that you could be several different people that appear at different times. we create an identity. In other words, it's not something that's there completely genetically. There's a lot of will and intelligence and creativity that goes into creating an identity for ourselves.
I can't believe this is happening.
Marker.
Action!
Set.
I kept remembering the title, and the title, very important. It's called A History of Violence. And I think the question is being asked whether violence is innate to us and whether a history of violence can become another history. Can you give up one entire persona and create an authentic new self?
Do we ever really know anyone? Do we ever really know ourselves? Fully? I don't know. I think it's just a continual process.
The whole movie is about pasts coming into the present. And it's also about family. Who is he when he comes back? Is he Tom? Is he Joey? Is he Joey Tom? At least for his wife, and at least for his children, who now know who he is. Certainly his son, who's old enough to really have seen him become Joey.
It leaves a lot of question as to whether or not he is a good guy or a bad guy. My response as Jack is he's just nervous and confused by all of it and scared for, you know, what's going to happen, because it's been a very tumultuous past few days for the family.
Nothing is ever the way that we think it is or think it ought to be. There's always a dimension that's hidden, whether it's in ourselves, in another person. There's always this underlying something that we can't control and we don't really understand.
It's not hopeless. There's always hope. He did come back to the house. Whatever you want to think happens, that's up to you.
It's a very interesting, sort of ambiguous ending, and I think that's one of the scenes that made me want to do this movie.
I think some people will think it's a very happy ending. I think some people will think it's very depressing. I think some people will think it's a little scary. The ending, to me, was very, very dark, and I wanted to suggest at least the possibility that something good could come of it. The thing that I thought was very funny is when we finally went into production, when we had the shooting script, everything had just paced out just right so that you turn to the last page of the script, and there's one line on it that says, "There's hope." And that's it. That's the last page of the script. You can tear it out, and there's not hope, I guess.
Need another one. One more, Walter. Just one more.
All right, one more, guys.
One more.
Russell needs another. Speed.
Mark.
Marker.
We're set.
That's a wrap on the fish, everyone. Yay! Thank you so much for a great film, a great show. That's a wrap. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. You're going to cut those parts out, right?